Talk about blocking. What does that mean? Why might it be beneficial when you're designing an experiment to block by a specific variable? It's kind of like stratifying when you're talking about sampling, but this is more on the experimental side of things versus observational study. So it says that many students enroll in prep courses to improve their SAT scores. 20 students who have taken the SAT once volunteered to participate in an experiment comparing online and classroom prep courses. Describe how we can use a completely randomized design to compare online and classroom SAT prep courses. I'm going to show you that if you're asked a question like this in free response setting, you can just draw a diagram. So what you would do, it's going to end up looking kind of like this, just so you can space things out accordingly right there. It's going to be like a little tree diagram almost, okay? Is you would just say, all right, here are the 20 volunteers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly assign, I'm going to put random assignment. So 20 people said, yeah, we'll participate. But what I need to do is randomly assign them to a treatment. We are comparing online versus classroom prep courses. So we're going to split them into as much as we can. Since there are 20, we can split them up 10 and 10. We're going to say that group 1, 10 students. Group 2, 10 students. You don't necessarily have to have the same amount in each. Like if there were 21 volunteers, it's okay that the groups are a little lopsided. And it depends on later on when we talk about blocking. But right now it makes sense to just split them up 10 and 10. And this group 1, their treatment, let's just say they're the online group. Treatment 1, they're taking that prep course online. Let's say I have all 20 names in a hat, and the first 10 I draw, I say, all right, you're in group 1, you're gonna participate in the online prep course, and then you'll take the SAT again, and we'll see how much you improve. If I didn't draw your name out of the hat, you're in group 2, and your treatment 2, you're gonna do like the in-person, the classroom prep, and you'll take the SAT again, and we'll see how many points you improve. So the important thing then is to come back together in the end. This is what the diagrams will always do. Come back together in the end and compare improvement. This is a diagram of a completely randomized design. I randomly assign individuals to treatments. In this case, I just split them down the middle, 10 and 10. My 2 treatments are online and classroom, and I need to compare them. Now, this gets interesting because among the 20 volunteers, 10 of them are in pre-cal, 6 of them are in algebra 2, and 4 of them are in geometry. What kind of an influence, what kind of problem do you think that could cause in this experiment when I'm trying to compare results at the end? If we have 3 different math levels of students, and I'm trying to see how much they improve after they do a prep course. Bingo, that's it. So we're probably going to see different results within each of those math levels, is what we're going to call them. So I think what I put on my notes originally and what's in Schoology, it says the responses will be more variable, like more spread out. Than they would otherwise. Our data is going to be all over the place, is what that says. Because people who are in geometry probably aren't going to show as much of an improvement after the prep courses because they're younger, they're not as strong in math, maybe they're not as invested in the prep course, okay? We are making some generalizations here, but the responses, again, that's the improvement score, like the response variable. The improvement is going to be all over the place. Then it would be if all students were same level maths. If all students were same level of math. That's what I mean by otherwise. Every student and every volunteer was in pre-cal, that might give me a little bit better results. Kind of like that control that we were talking about in experiments. Okay, well, how do we address this problem? Well, we have an option. We can just leave out part of these people and say, I only want the pre-cal volunteers, but then that like eliminates half of the people that said they would participate. And so option 1 is kind of silly, but we could eliminate 2 of the 3 math courses. If we want to address the problem of the data being so spread out, we could just say, okay, again, like only pre-cal kids are going to be included in this. But that's going to give us a smaller scope of inference. That's bad. Smaller scope of inference. That's not a good option. How can we keep all of these people that said that they would participate involved? And the answer is by something called blocking. What that means is, we're going to group kids by math level, group or block kids by math level, then randomly assign treatments within the blocks. That diagram that you drew at the top there, basically there would be more splits occurring. So we would take the 10 people in pre-cal and we would say 5 of you are going to get treatment 1 and 5 of you are going to get treatment 2. Then we're going to take the 6 kids in algebra 2 and we're going to say 3 and 3. 3 of you will do online, 3 of you do classroom. And then we're going to take the 4 kiddos in geometry and say 2 and 2. So your diagram would just have more split up. Instead of all 20 being randomly assigned, you would have like 3 tiers essentially. So here are their improvement, and I looked back at this and I guess this means how many points they improved on their SAT score. Let's just go with that. Here are the results of the experiment using math level as a blocking variable. So they've split it up, like all of the pre-cal kids, whether they did online or classroom, their improvements and their scores, all the algebra kids, and all the geometry kids are kind of grouped together. Very much like stratifying, and we'll put that in our notes in just a second. Make dot plots to compare the improvements of the students in online and improvements of students in classroom. So we're going to make 2 dot plots, one for online, one for classroom. In other words, we are going to put all 3 math levels together for improvement of online scores. And then underneath that, we'll make another dot plot for improvement with the classroom. So I always just kind of start by looking at the smallest number and the largest number, so I know what should my scale be. And I'm looking at only online stuff over here, and it looks like I need to go from the smallest number is 30 all the way up to 100. So I probably just count by tens. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. I'm just going to plot all of the online data. I'll probably just go from the bottom up. So online is 30, 30, 40, 60, 50. $100, 90, 90, $100, $100. Because once again in the directions it said make dot plots to compare, so there are going to be two of them, improvements of students for online and improvement of students in classroom. So if you were given raw data like this, that's how you would know you're splitting it up by treatment, online versus classroom. All the pre-cal and algebra 2 and geometry kiddos are together in this dot plot. We're going to do the same thing, but now this is going to be the classroom improvement. And it looks like classroom goes from 0 up to 70. So I'll probably do the same thing. I'll probably start at 0 and count by tens. And then I'll plot the data. Oops, it goes up to 80, doesn't it? Wait a minute, I don't have room. I've got 10 dots on each dot plot. Can you just double check? Now we did what they told us to do. And everything looks nice and neat. But here's the question. Based on what's right here in front of you, can you tell if there's convincing evidence that the online course is better? Because it looks like in the classroom they made pretty good improvements as well. And then online they made pretty good improvements. And yeah, we've got some larger numbers up here, but the majority of the classroom people improved and the majority of online people improved. So we did all of that just to say it's really hard to tell right now when everyone is lumped together which treatment showed the most improvement. So I'm just going to write really big in the middle there. It's hard to tell. And the question, what's hard to tell, is if there's convincing evidence that the online course is better. Because we decided that math course level would influence the improvement, then we need to block by that. So on the next page, you've got this dot plot that does that. It shows by blocking. And let me just kind of help you out here with a little key. You've got dark boxes, little circles, and little triangles, and you could probably figure this out on your own. But the boxes are going to be the geometry kids. The circles are the algebra 2. And the triangles are pre-cal. So just stare at this for a second, because you may have never seen a graph like this before. Stacked dot plots. It says that in number 3 we ignored the fact that we blocked by math level. So here's the dot plot again using different symbols for students in each math level. Okay, I want you to just stare at the dark boxes. If you just stare at the geometry kids, you can see that the online geometry students showed the most improvement. Now just look at the circles. If we're only looking at algebra 2, you can tell that Only the online Algebra 2 students, they showed the most improvement. And if you just look at pre-cal way up here, it's the online students who showed the most improvement. So now we have really strong evidence because all three groups showed the most improvement in the online course. It says, notice that within each math level, the online students clearly did better. We couldn't see this difference when we ignored the blocks because of all of the variability created by math class. I don't really know why this is here again, other than it just kind of like tells you here that the average improvement for students in pre-cal class was, you'll learn all of these symbols later, but that's the mean of the sample. So the average improvement is 86 for pre-cal. The average improvement for Algebra 2 is 40 points, and the average improvement for geometry is 20. If we knew that, that would be a really good indication, like right off the bat, that we should block, because these are very different between the groups. The average improvement is vastly different in a pre-cal kid versus a geometry kid. So if we know this, the question is, how could we use this information to account for the variability? Well, we could do that by blocking. Blocking would be a good idea because average improvement is vastly different between math levels. It's really redundant, but it's just saying whether you have a dot plot in front of you or whether you have this highlighted information in front of you, if you can see that between the groups it's vastly different, then it's kind of telling you, hey, you should block by math level. So what is a block by definition? A block is a group of experimental units that are known to be similar in some way. A group of experimental units, if they're people, we would call them subjects, that are known to be similar in some way. And specifically, their similarity is expected to affect the response variable. The similarity is expected to affect the response variable. Now you're starting to see how similar it is to stratifying, which was when we, like the sunflower experiment where we stratified by row, we grouped things together that were alike. That's what we're doing, but this is just the experiment side of things, where you take your experimental units and you group them together by some kind of variable that they have in common that you know might affect the outcome. What's the, in a randomized block design, this is actually very important. Kind of squeeze it on there, sorry. In a randomized block design, random assignment to treatments happens within each block. Random assignment to treatments happens within each block. I'll explain in just a second. In other words, I would say, all right, you 10 pre-cal kids, and put your name in a hat. First 5 that I pull out of the hat, you get to the online. The ones that I don't draw, you're going to do a classroom. And I would gather the Algebra 2 kids, and I've got to randomly assign, within that block, I have to randomly assign them to a treatment. And I get the 4 geometry kids, and I have to make sure I'm randomly assigning 2 and 2 to their treatments, 1 and 2. That's very important. All right, what is the benefit of blocking? And it just accounts for a source of variability. Just like stratifying. Blocking is a good way to increase your chances of finding convincing evidence. I'm just going to put increases chances of finding convincing evidence. And that phrase of finding convincing evidence, you're going to write that phrase so many times in the screen, and you can do it in your sleep. It's a very important concept when you get to a screen and you talk about different ways that we can prove a hypothesis. So if you're just kind of thrown to the wolves and you're like, okay, create a randomized block experiment, how would you know how to create your blocks or your groups? And the answer there is, again, you're just going to try and make groups that are similar in some way that might affect the outcome. So let's write, use variables that are most strongly associated with the response variable. Most strongly associated with the response variable. What I mean by that is block by variables that you think would have the most influence on the outcome of the experiment. Blocks should be homogeneous. But different than other blocks. It just seems very redundant because the concept, when we covered this when we were talking about stratifying, and this might help you understand stratifying better. If you're still stuck between the, is it a cluster sample, is it a stratified sample? It's very similar to this. So your groups are very similar within, different between. We're going to turn the page and kind of revisit that whole caffeine experiment where we split kids up to see how caffeine affects pulse rates. This might be too general, but let's see if we can throw some ideas out there. In that caffeine experiment, how could we maybe block? What are some variables that we said might be confounding variables that we could block by to make sure that we had more convincing evidence that it was the caffeine that was increasing the pulse rates? What's something that you think would... So the response is pulse rate. Let's start with that. Response variable. Pulse rate. What are some characteristics of people that we said could influence whether their pulse rate went up or not compared to the person sitting next to them? How, like the amount? Yes, and that would be more on the control side. But we talked about like maybe... Yeah, caffeine tolerance, body size. I'm thinking that those might affect, okay, these are the characteristics of the experimental units, the variables of people that I think might influence whether their pulse rate really goes up. So I'm going to block by that. You could block by body size. You could ask people like, you know, how often do you have caffeine? I want to put the people who get coffee every single day, I'm going to put them together. people that really don't drink caffeine a lot, I'm going to put them together. So let's block by caffeine tolerance. Anything that would create variability in pulse rate. So when you mention like the amount of soda or making sure that we were giving everybody either diet soda or soda with sugar, those are more of the things that you're doing on your end to control the outcome of the experiment. This is more about what characteristics of them would influence the results. What's the difference between blocking and stratifying? Blocking is for experiments. Blocking, experiments. The concept of stratifying is when we're talking about getting a sample, how we pull our sample. A lot of times in experiments, we're just relying on volunteers. Because I can't just call somebody up and say, hey, you were on my list. I need you to come in and take this pill, and I need to see if it affects your blood pressure, right? So stratifying is more for like observational studies, surveys, and that sort of thing. Where blocking would be, hey, I have these people who said they would participate. Now I need to split them up into their homogeneous groups. Matched pairs design is really interesting, and it's something that they like to put on free response. So matched pair design is when blocks include only 2 units. Matched pairs, here's your clue, it's 2. When blocks include only 2 units. A very common example would be twins. So if I can get a block of 2 people that share very close genetic characteristics, maybe I can have one twin. There's, I think, a problem about like acne medicine. So you get these twins and they all have kind of similar severity of acne. One of the twins is going to take this acne medicine, or we're going to randomly assign one of the twins the actual medicine and the other twin a placebo, and then we'll kind of see what the results are. Okay, that would be like matched pairs. So you're either going to have your block consist of 2 similar people, think twins, or this is kind of weird, the block could be actually just one person that gets both treatments. So I'll explain in just a minute. So the block could be the same person, one person, but receives both treatments. I'll give you an example. Specifically in a random order. Blocks have to have random assignment within the block. And I'm going to give you a really good example of real-world context for a matched pairs experimental design where one person is a block. I'm going to put this up on the screen, and if you want to copy it down, you can. If you think listening will be enough, you can. I know that's kind of hard to do because it's in light blue. But if I was doing a taste test of 2 different hot sauces, and I said, okay, each person, you're going to taste both of the salsas or the hot sauce, and I want you to rate which one you like better. I wouldn't want them all to taste the first salsa, like the same salsa first for everybody, because what if that's like the hot one? It burns their tongue, and then they can't even taste the second one, and that's why they put that they like the first one better. I mean, you have to make sure that if one person is going to taste both, that you either like flip a coin or you pull a 1 or a 2 out of a hat. You have to make sure that you randomly assign the order of treatments to that one person. Does that make sense? So a block could be twins, and I randomly assign each of them a treatment, or it could be one person that does both treatments, but I have to make sure I randomly assign the order. I know that's a little bit harder to read in the light blue there. But that's on Schoology as well. So that's pretty much the concept of blocking and why it will help you create a better design. Now, don't be under the impression that blocking is always better. Sometimes you can't block. Sometimes there aren't characteristics that people have in common that would affect the outcome, so you just do a completely randomized design. Sometimes it is appropriate to block. And then your homework problem's there at the bottom of your page.